Hello, and happy May from your friends here at the Financial Advisory Group. Well, if you're up here in the Northeast, it's nice we've actually had a couple days in a row of the sun coming out and no rain for a couple days. Let's hope now we can get to a weekend with no rain. As we get into our May video, today we're going to cover an educational topic first, which is our goal going forward, is to try to cover not just market type discussions, but also provide some educational content and really start focusing on the things that we can control, like do we want to do Roth conversions or qualified charitable distributions, as opposed to focusing so much on the markets, which, to be honest, right, we wish we could control, but we honestly can't. So as we get into the educational topic for today, we're going to cover something which you probably hear more and more about as we get more questions about it. Who is this IRMAA that we keep hearing about? And to be honest, do we want to know who IRMAA is, or do we want to try to avoid her? And we'll have Mary Winand from her office. She's the head of our financial planning department, walk us through the definitions of IRMAA and some thoughts about it from our perspective. But before we get there, our role as your financial planner is to really try to make the plan as smooth as possible. We all in our minds look at this top picture here and see the smooth ride that we all want to have. The reality is there's bumps in the way. And this picture illustrates that we know the bumps are going to be there, but part of our goal is to make this ride as smooth as possible, to understand that IRMAA may be something we run into, and instead of being afraid of it, let's have a plan for it. So without further ado, I'll turn the video over to Mary, who will walk us through what IRMAA is, what it means, and are there things that we can do to get around it. Thank you, Mary.
Hi, everyone. I am here to talk you through IRMAA, which is an acronym that stands for Income-Related Monthly Adjustment Amounts. And while the acronym doesn't specifically say it, it applies to Medicare. A lot of recipients of Medicare don't realize that their Part B and Part D premium is tied to their income. So there's potential there for you to have to pay a surcharge if your income exceeds a certain threshold. And it does depend on how you file. So there's different brackets for single filers, there's different brackets for married couples filing jointly, and there's different brackets for married couples filing separately. So what happens is these costs are relative to 2024. And what happens is the Social Security Administration looks back to 2022 to see what your income is. So for those married couples filing jointly in 2022, who had a modified adjusted gross income amount of less than 206, had no surcharge. So then come 2024, they pay that $174 a month for their Medicare Part B. If in 2022, a married couple filing jointly's income exceeded $206,000, even by just $1, it is a cliff. So if you exceed that bracket by $1, you then fall into the next bracket, and you would immediately pay about $70 a month per recipient. So this does only apply to individuals receiving Medicare. We do work with couples who, because there's an age difference, one of them's on Medicare and one of them's not yet. And this would only apply to the recipient of Medicare, even though they look at the joint filing. So these are the different brackets. And if you're single, these would be the brackets. Married couples filing separately. This would be, you would definitely want to talk to your CPA to see if there was a benefit to filing separately, because from a Medicare standpoint, you would pretty quickly be paying a significant amount in Medicare costs. So it is something determined annually, so it's not like it's a life sentence, but every year the Social Security Administration automatically reviews it. And if it does apply to you, if you do have a surcharge, you would receive a letter from the Social Security Administration on the level of surcharge and the reason for the surcharge. So there are some planning opportunities if we see that your income is kind of teetering close to the brackets. One of them is qualified charitable distributions. For those of you who are over 70 and a half, that's an option. If you have charitable intent, you can give directly to a charity from your IRA, and it avoids taxation. So if you're close to that 206 this year, to kind of keep it under that, that could be an option. If you need a large distribution from your IRA, we can look at distributing it over 2 tax years if you're getting close to the bracket. So there are some planning opportunities if we think you're getting close to try to reduce your income, just so that you don't have that surcharge. But again, it is reassessed every year. So if you fall into the bracket one year and not the next year, then you would just pay this surcharge for 1 year. And then the next year you would go back to paying the base premium for Medicare. So because they look back 2 years, depending on your financial circumstance, 2 years ago, it could be vastly different than where it is this year. There's a few life-changing events that the Social Security Administration will take into consideration to if your income from 2 years ago is drastically different than how it is this year. You can submit this form to them and they can reconsider it, but it's not guaranteed to adjust the cost of your Medicare surcharge. But there is the option, depending on 2 years ago, if you were working, you had a big bonus, you received a severance, you lost a spouse, you got married. So there's a few life-changing events that allow you to submit this form that you're basically telling the Social Security Administration that even though 2 years ago I fell into that bracket because of something that happened in my life, I'm no longer in that bracket, so I don't want to pay the surcharge. So they'll review it. Again, it's not guaranteed, but it's something that if we're working with retirees, we'll encourage them to fill this out just to see if they can get a break in that year. But again, it's not guaranteed. So that's pretty much a wrap on IRMAA. I'll now pass it back to Damien and he'll wrap up the video. We'd be happy to answer any questions that I didn't cover. We hope everyone has a great Memorial Day weekend. For those of you in Pennsylvania, I think this is one of the few weekends where rain isn't forecasted. So have a great weekend, enjoy the sunshine, and take care.
Thank you, Mary. And it's great to try to keep some of these topics that the more we know about them, the more it helps us on the planning path and get you steered in the right direction. And sometimes we can't avoid these, but we just need to know what's coming and do our best to jump around it. So just some quick thoughts then when we transition to the market side of things. If you haven't heard, 2024 is an election year. And if you haven't realized, we have one of these about every 4 years, a presidential election. Yet it seems like every time one comes up, we act like this is something like this has never happened before. A couple thoughts we just want to get quickly into here is that it doesn't matter who wins the election, right? And our point to this is that the market is driven more by fundamentals and how companies are doing, not who's in the White House. We think this chart is a great illustration of looking back over the last 50 years and seeing that no matter where you stood from a political standpoint, the best thing to do was to invest through all presidencies, not pick one over the other. If we look at this chart down here, we don't want to be the red or orange line. We don't want to be the blue line. We want to be the gray line, that we're indifferent to who's in the White House from a market's perspective. And I think that's the most important thing we can keep in mind as we get closer to this election at year end or in November, is to make sure we don't get too caught up in that thought process. We've been through elections before. Hopefully we'll be through many elections again. And our goal is just to make sure we have the right focus in mind and keep in mind that as long as the economy is doing well and companies are healthy, that's the most important thing. A last thought, we had a celebratory event happen over the last couple of weeks, is that the Dow hit 40,000. 40,000, that's a big number. That's pretty impressive. An economist that we follow, Ryan Dietrich, who is now with a group called Carson Group, posted something recently, which is pretty darn amazing if you think about this, that over the last 7 years, we saw a once in 100-year pandemic. Our economy literally stopped. Remember, March 13th, the economy just stopped. Supply chain issues galore because everything shut down. Generational inflation, the highest inflation we've seen in probably 50 years or so. 2 bear markets, one in 2020, one in 2022, as well as a very close to bear market at the end of 2018. Multiple major wars still breaking out today, yet the Dow went from 20,000 to 40,000 during that 7 or 8 year span. Let's keep this in mind the next time we continue to hear more negative news. The market is not investing in the world. The market is investing in companies like Microsoft, companies like NVIDIA, who weren't even talked about 7 years ago, companies like Google. So let's keep this in mind as we move forward. And it's becoming harder and harder to, as we talk about often, to ignore the news. But keep in mind that the most important thing is let's focus on the right things, focus on what we can control, and have a happy Dow 40,000, right? And we hope we see the next 50,000, 60,000, and not get too distracted by the news events of the day, which is hard today. On that note, we hope you have a great Memorial Day weekend. We hope everyone has safe travels if you're heading out and about, and enjoy that time with family and friends. And that's the most important thing to all of us, is having that time and using it to the best of our ability. Thank you as always for the trust and confidence you continue to place in us. Enjoy the time this weekend, and we look forward to seeing you or talking with you sometime soon. Make it a great Memorial Day weekend.